Hey everybody, welcome to Hashing It Out. I'm Jordan and I'm a senior software engineer here at the Nervos Foundation. And today it is my honor to bring back Kevin Wang, who is the Nervos Network co-founder and the CEO of Tunnel Vision Labs. Kevin, how are you doing today?
Hey, Jordan. Good to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back. And so today we're going to be talking about Khalani, the decentralized solver infrastructure for intent-driven applications. If that sounds a little bit confusing to you, don't worry. We're going to tell you all about what that actually means. But before I get started, this is a live show. So just like every live show, I have to mention three quick things. Number one, we're not going to be talking about the price today. There's plenty of places you can talk about the price. We recommend you join the Nervos Nation Discord, or excuse me, Telegram channel, where they have a special place for everybody to talk about the price there. We're also not going to be talking about any future exchanges or any other confidential information that we are not allowed to discuss. We're not going to discuss it. And then also the opinions expressed on this program are of the individuals, not of the foundation itself. So we are broadcasting live on Twitter and YouTube right now, but you can only actually interact with us in the chat room if you're on YouTube. So we recommend that. Although it seems like about 80% of you prefer Twitter for some reason, we're still going to recommend YouTube anyway because we can't see the comments otherwise. We're going to be having Q&A at the end if we have time, so please feel free at any point in time during the conversation, go ahead and throw your questions into the YouTube chat room and we'll try to get to them at the very end. So let's stop wasting any more time because we have plenty to go through. Number one for you, Kevin, right off the bat, tell us in your own words, what is Kalani?
Yeah. Okay. So I think you mentioned it already, right? So Khalani Network is a decentralized software infrastructure. Again, it's a little bit. I think for folks that are not sort of following the intents narrative, it might be difficult to understand what that even means, right? So I think a good way to explain all this is to start with the intents and then when people talk about intents, typically they contrast intents with transactions and as a way to interact with the blockchain. So today, when most of us interact with the blockchains, either with MetaMask or your mobile wallets, it typically just signs a transaction, right, with your private key, and the transaction goes to the blockchain and then hit some predefined smart contract interface, right? And then from there, it executes the code, and it could be a single contract, it could be multiple contracts, and so on and so forth, right? But the transaction signing, the interface is very standard. So that's the problem with that is the user basically interact with the applications with predefined execution path, okay? So whether it's about trading tokens, whether it's purchasing NFTs, whether it's maybe casting governance or any other sort of interactions, it's always directed for a predetermined sort of computation or execution path. Whereas intent as an alternative interaction pattern, it allows the user to sign an off-chain message, okay? And then the off-chain message constrain the outcome of the transaction instead of prescribe the specific sort of interface to hit. So what this would allow is to say, so instead of the user say what I want to do, right? The user says what I want in the end, what I want the result to be, instead of whose contract I want to hit, whose contract I want to execute, right? So in a way, one sort of a good analogy I've seen people sort of giving this is, transactions. It's where people say, let's say start from San Jose to San Francisco, right? So I want to hop in a car, I want to drive on this road, then I want to hit 101, Highway 101, and then I want to get off this exit and turn left and turn right and so on and so forth. It's a procedural. It's a collection of steps. It's a collection of execution steps that will get you in the end, right? Whereas intents is more declarative, right? So intent just says, Now I'm in San Jose, and I want to go to San Francisco. Okay, so I probably don't even want to do that myself. And then I'm going to broadcast a message that says, I want a car, or I want an Uber car that can take me to San Francisco. Okay, so and somebody else will provide the service, and then they only get paid if in the end I'm truly in San Francisco. Then they get paid. Okay, so how it's different is, basically transactions focus on the procedures, the imperative steps, and the intent focus on the outcome, right? It's very declarative. So now that's what intent-centric interactions are, and then you see a lot of discussions, a lot of people write about this around this topic. But what benefit does this have? Why are we talking about intent as an interesting alternative? The benefit of intent is, first, it ensures that whatever the user wants in the end, it will always be guaranteed, right? So they will always get it. Because otherwise, like I used the example in going to San Francisco, right? If I'm not ending up in San Francisco, if I somehow, somebody took away the bridge and go to Marin County, then the driver or whoever, the service provider does not, they don't get paid, okay? So for intents, they always make sure that the user get what they want, desire in the end, right? And it provides a sort of interaction semantic user can specify what they want in the end. And secondly, intents also allow user to express something like a preference function, right, or utility function. When there are multiple service providers that could all provide sort of similar services, the user is at a point that can optimize what they want the best. Coming back from, this is for Nervos community. So coming back sort of to the Nervos community, a lot of this is sort of the concept of intent emerge from the EVM, the Ethereum, and basically account model blockchains. But this does not actually apply for Nervos CKB or UTXO chain, because when you interact with a UTXO style blockchain, a lot of this already given to you as guarantees, right? So in other words, when you interact with UTXO blockchains, you actually specify outcome instead of transactions, right? So you actually, transaction generation is actually off-chain, right? So this is when I sometimes talk to people that UTXO blockchains are actually intent-centric from day one, right? So we just don't use the vocabulary, we don't use the concept of intents. So this is why we can dive a little bit deeper, Jordan, when we talk about like Khalani's sort of internals and architecture and some of the concepts, and then we use a lot of the things we've learned over the last several years, sort of R&D at Nervos, and then we realize this is actually the architecture that can solve a lot of the issues that we observe in various communities.
Right. I want to take a second to just back up, and you mentioned that Ethereum has some intent-based stuff to it already, which is interesting because when you look at the transaction structure, it is, but it isn't. Like, for example, you would put in a transaction if you were trying to bid on an NFT that was coming out, an expensive NFT, and there was a lot of demand. You'd place an intent to bid, but you're not guaranteed to win. And a lot of us during the bull market, we saw our transactions failed and we were charged this huge, enormous fee, sometimes over $100, but we didn't actually get the NFT, right? So how is that different from an intent in Khalani?
Yeah. So, on Ethereum, first of all, most of the type of, you see on Ethereum are transaction-based today, and then you do have certain class of applications where you will send an Offchain message instead of authorizing specifically, to interact with the smart contract interface, right? And so, for example, any of the DEX aggregators you would use on Ethereum today are likely, for example, CowSwap and one-inch fusion specifically. Those are more intent-like systems where you would only authorize a you can call them limit orders, you can call them intent to say, hey, I want to, for both of them are swaps, token swaps. You can say, I want to swap token A for token B, and then I want as many of token B as outcome as possible, right? And then you allow solvers on the other side to bring the solution, and then the solver compete with themselves and then actually bring the solution to you. So certain type of applications on Ethereum are intent-centric today, but definitely not all of them. And I think for NFTs, it's also interesting because, there is, for example, Seaport that it's built sort of enabling the OpenSea platform is actually somewhat intent focused, right? So you say, hey, I have this NFT, I want to be able to sell at this price, and then you just wait, and somebody else down the road will feel this intent or be the counterparty for you. They will buy the same NFT. So as long as both sides can sort of satisfy each other, then the trade will go through, right? So in that sense, certain type of apps on Ethereum are intent-centric, but definitely not that many as of today.
I see. So Tempest has been mentioned, of course, which our community, Nervos community, is very familiar with Tempest.
Yeah.
And it was in development, and then we know that it kind of disappeared for a while. But Tanner's back with Khalani now. So can you tell us how similar is this to what Tempest was doing?
Yeah, I can give a little backstory. I think, for folks in the community for a long time, they already know kind of the story, and then, but it was probably never sort of, fully told in public. But Tempest, so Tempest, for people that don't know, or newer to the community, so Tempest is the code name for a project that, Tanner and I, to some extent, also were part of that as well. Sort of built together at we are still at Nervos when he was still at Nervos, and then so what happened? So Tempest was the earlier version of what's known today as Validity. Validity is the VM for Khalani. So just to make the connection before we go further. So Tempest was built, I think, within Nervos community. I think at least 2 years ago. Again, the time is a little bit, I would say somewhere between 2 to 3 years. But even before Tempest, sort of the informal R&D started before Tempest, was a thing. It was probably stretched even longer than that, right? And then a lot of the issue that Tempest was trying to fix was this, how do you sort of think about from the intent vocabulary, how do you think about the solver side? In other words, how do you have sort of an application framework that you can reason with sort of partial signed UTXO transactions, right? And then have that integrated with, and then future to be settled on chain, right? So it's also formal methods sort of framework. And then again, it's been a while. So Tanner built that early version of it. Then I think Tanner sort of took, I think, 1 year maybe from Nervos. He really wanted to see, he believed that, this system could also be built on sort of state-focused, state-first blockchain, aka UTXO first blockchain. But then he had to go to the other side. He had to go to EVM to work at Maker for, I think, a year or so, maybe a year and a half. And then just to make sure that he sees the alternative, whether it's possible to build on alternative platforms. So he then worked there as a sort of firmware verification engineer, protocol security engineer, and then work on having, it's essentially sort of a further constraint, further development based on this formal method sort of programming framework that he was working on. But then after working for that for a year or so at Maker, he realized that he cannot build that with EVM. And this is why he came back, I think around, if my time is right, I think around 2021, 2022. And then to become an independent researcher, sort of funded by the foundation, and to continue work on what's known today as Validity. So that's sort of the old backstory, right? And then, obviously on Khalani side, I was sort of at a sort of moving towards enabling sort of more open-ended interoperability, open interoperability, like not anybody can join, and then anybody can bring liquidity and execution from any blockchain. And it's, for folks that are sort of following the intent space, I think that would be a more open version of some sort of a cross intent-centric blockchain protocol. So that was what I was trying to build. But then, so we went in that direction for a while. Then we realized really this is just one of the applications to a much bigger class of a problem, right? So which is how you enable permissionless collaboration between solvers, or collaboration between independent agents, right? And then we actually had the research, the infrastructure that we know how to build it, which is what was known as Tempest. So this is why we put sort of the intent infrastructure of Tempest, and then we put sort of merged together with the interoperability attempts in early days, and then we put them together as known as Khalani today. So I hope this makes sense. I think for folks that have been with us for a while, you probably have some of the context, and both Tanner and I were pretty active, also doing all this. but that's sort of the backstory. I hope that makes sense.
Right. Okay. So the two projects were ultimately merged together. We got the best of the previous Khalani merged with the best of Tempest to create this new system. And let me see if I can just summarize it a little bit with the intents. So you're putting out there a much more advanced type of intent that is saying, basically, these are my preferences, and this is what I'm trying to do. Yeah. But you're not explicitly saying that it's supposed to interact with this specific smart contract or even this specific chain necessarily. You're just putting out this message. This is what I'm willing to give. This is what I expect to get. And then you've developed the solver infrastructure, which allows competition between different participants in the network to actually try to get you the best deal so that you accept the deal. Yeah. Now, so now the solvers themselves, like, is this something that is highly specialized that you're going to have to be an engineer to be able to use? Like, how do people participate as solvers?
Yeah, so in the old days, well, not old days. So without Khalani, the barrier will be very high, right? Because you have to be able to build this from scratch, and then you have to acquire sort of competency in multiple directions, right? So you have to be able to monitor the blockchain, you have to capture opportunities, you have to calculate P&L, you have to know how to execute, which oftentimes involve collaboration with block builders, and then you have to know how to sort liquidity, have to know how to manage your inventory, you have to know how to, for like a lot of trading centric sort of solving capacity, you have to know how to do like statistical not data neutral strategies, but like statistical driven strategies, which is again very, so you have to be good in pretty much all the directions that you can have some sort of profit expectations, right? So this is the barriers are very, very high. And part of what Khalani is trying to do is to reduce this barrier to people that want to build solvers to at least 10x, right? So you don't have to be sort of good with all of them. You can just focus on one thing. And for example, if you have a specialty, just for example, you know where to look, right? So there's always some sort of DEX that could be profitable, but nobody else is looking there, right? So you could bring that expertise and then rely on everybody else for execution, right? So you don't actually have to do the execution, on-chain execution. Somebody else can do that on your behalf. And then you may not even have inventory, right? So you may not have $1 million you can carry to take advantage of opportunities to fill those intents, but somebody else can bring the capital that you can work with. So that's the whole idea of Khalani, right? So to be a platform, so that if you want to build, if you have you have insight that you want to, build solvers, you don't have to just open editor and start coding from line one, right? So you can build on top of the existing platform with a lot of sort of solving capacity that other solvers have contributed to, right? And then you can just specialize in what you do, and then also contribute to the platform as well as solving capacity, so other people can come work with you as well. So that's the whole idea, right?
Right. And then this is, of course, like as opposed to something that's very chain specific. I mean, that's one of the solutions that Validity provides, and it's a single language and single VM that will execute for all platforms. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think generally you can think about sort of solvers in intent space as off-chain programming, and how do you, so it's a different class of problems. So you're already, so when intents are created, they typically are created as client messages and then broadcasted peer-to-peer. And so when that happens, right, so it's really about how do you coordinate, and how do you coordinate behaviors for you can say those are transactions, you can say those are coordination, like in the off-chain space, but knowing those are eventually going to be settled on-chain, right? So that's the space that we're talking about. And then in that space, off-chain space is really off-chain of any blockchain, right? So there is no Nervos off-chain versus Bitcoin off-chain versus Ethereum off-chain versus other chain off-chain, right? There's only just off-chain of every chain. And it's a very interesting paradigm because there's also been a lot of sort of hype on Bitcoin and application built on top of Bitcoin. I think this is also a good direction as well, right? Because layer two, which is so-called layer two, which is just a slight different framing of off-chain coordination, right? So if you have this already, and then this is the space where all these sort of different coordination can happen, regardless where you can define their settlement in a separate sort of context, but coordination can happen off-chain, connecting every blockchain.
Right, I see. So I know that you've been working pretty closely with the Axon team. So can you tell us a little bit about how Khalani uses Axon and CKB?
Yeah, so we, for folks that don't know, right? So Axon is a layer two chain framework that built out of Fundamental Foundation, and so right now our sort of internal, so Khalani is also going to be a blockchain, right? So our current blockchain, internal blockchain, is built with Axon. So Axon gives this good property of it's sort of both EVM as well as its UTXO, because Axon has what we call image cells that a lot of noise on the background.
Yeah, you sound fine.
Just make sure it's not me. Okay. So Axon allows this sort of dual VM architecture, right? So it has both a UTXO and then has a UTXO VM as well as the sort of account and EVM. That's a good place for us to start because Khalani and Validity is going to build out of the sort of UTXO side of Axon, and the EVM can be a sort of compatibility layer that allow us to map to externally generated intent, especially coming from other EVM chains. So that's how we're going to be using Axon, and we're going to probably be we're going to have a lot of sort of deep customization to Axon, but again, this is very, very early days, right? So these are still research topics. The core of Khalani, though, is obviously on the UTXO side, and then and this is how it connects to CKB and Nervos, right? So it's the same cell model that we use at Nervos, at the state transition model. So we definitely share a lot of the the tooling, and then potentially part of the infrastructure as well. Again, this is all being very actively built, right? So in a way, you can think, obviously, but other than the cell model, we have validity and being a language and form execution environment and all that. So that would be a layer on top of that, right? So in a way, you can kind of see this as a sort of isomorphic to CKB, the same way that CKB is to Bitcoin, right? It's because from Bitcoin to CKB, you have the same UTXO model, and then you have the same general interaction pattern, and and then even the scripting and then the transaction structure is very similar in compared to other UTXO chains, right? So you have like witness and you have log scripts and so on and so forth. And then from sort of CKB's UTXO model to validity, the underlying is also have a lot of similarity, but then we just expanded to add another sort of formal execution environment on top of what is a UTXO-based state transition model. So if that makes sense, right? So in a way, you can think about, either think about isomorphic chain. Another term that we're trying to use is sister chain. Right? It's very similar. Again, if we say it's in the Offchain space and programming sort of solvers and Offchain coordination, then I think for Bitcoin and Nervos, it will be even easier to coordinate the transaction because the transaction syntax and structure is identical almost. So that's hopefully give a little bit explanation in terms of architecture.
Right. So I'm curious though. And so Axon is a EVM sidechain, we know, and we also know that there's certain things about it that are a little bit tailored towards CKB in some of the features. So it sounded like most of Khalani is actually built on CKB, and then you're using Axon for the EVM features to help it interface with other chains. Is this because of you're saying it's heavily modified? I'm going to assume, and tell me if I'm correct, that this is something Khalani could not be built today on like another EVM sidechain.
No, for example. Not possible. It's not possible.
It requires Axon and these heavy modifications that you were talking about.
Yeah, so yeah, that's correct. I mean, we're going to do a lot of deep modifications, right? So like when people talk about Axon, don't assume it's Axon at the time of the December 2023 or January 2024, right? So it's open source framework, so we're going to push it pretty far. For example, we definitely today on the UTXO side it's read only, so we're going to definitely add sort of write capability to it so it can be standalone. And then we're going to expand, for example, the authorization for writes. Today it's only relayers, but then again, a lot of the context is for sort of what has been done, and then what we'll be adding as well. So it will be quite different, right? So starting from what we see today, but it definitely will have Khalani and validity embedded as part of it. Sometimes we call this the embedded coprocessor. I think that's a good term as well. And obviously, down the future as open source project, anybody can also launch a chain with this set of infrastructure, and then it will become natively intent-driven. So any applications of intent-centric protocols can be built directly on top of it. But that's a little bit down the road, right? So this is where we are today.
Right. Okay. So we've all seen you making some rounds on Twitter.
Yeah.
And we're curious if there's any way you can answer this, and if you can't, that's fine. But are there any partners that are announced at this point?
Yeah. So I mean, we haven't really sort of pushing on the announcement side, and we probably lean towards announce them when they're ready. And we definitely are talking to a lot of people, separately, and there's a lot of protocols that we can integrate very quickly, and not quickly as in time, but quickly as in with ease, right? So we can easily sort of slot in other ecosystems. What we're seeing as a trend is a lot, and this could be coming from this mega trend of modular blockchains, that we see a lot of mediated transaction execution pattern, where users don't interact with the blockchains directly, but have a third party sort of mediate that transaction for them, right? So another way to say this is like computation moved off chain, and then with callbacks hitting back to on chain, bring back to on chain. So we're seeing a lot of that patterns, and then just about like anywhere you can see this pattern, whether like on the EVM side, for example, sort of account abstraction is off-chain transaction bundlers, and then you have in the cross-chain space you have relayers, and then in a way you can think about rollups also as a very, very special case of this, where the sequencer mediated transaction in a way that we eventually settle on layer one, for instance, and like all the DEX trace is basically mediated by solvers that bring the solution for you, right? So even DeFi protocols, a lot of going down this route as well. So there's a lot of places that Khalani can sort of slot in as sort of a solver infrastructure to integrate with other infrastructure.
All right, interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the current status. Where is Khalani today in its development?
Yeah, we are pretty much heads down and building towards you can maybe call that early testnet or some sort of feature complete. We're mostly focusing on validity side of things, and so hopefully down the road, I think definitely this year we should be able to have something more substantial. I think maybe within 3 to 6 months we might have maybe the language can be maybe V1 of the language that or whatever we have we can publish, and then just to show people what it would look like and how potentially interact with it and some of the underlying concepts of the language. So that's what we're shooting for.
I see. So after the language part is actually set, what other components are actually needed before there's a usable product?
So again, the plan for us is to the focus is definitely on the language. I mean, other than the language, the VM where the language is executed, right? So language, the VM, I think is at core, and then specifications, tutorial, I think all those will be there, and Khalani will be launched as a chain, so there need to be a host chain. Where again we just talk about sort of heavily modifying axon. As axon, for people who don't know, is it's basically BFT consensus, and but it's a very flexible sort of chain framework, and it's IBC enabled, so will allow interoperability with all the Cosmos ecosystem or any other chain that's IBC enabled. So after validity and the virtual machine is it's never complete, right? But it's it's ready to have a first version of release. Then you will wrap a chain around it, and maybe at that time you can have like an early. I mean, obviously, to have like a full featured product, you have to think about consensus mechanism. You have to think about tokenomics and all the other things that will come with it, right? But I think just to say we're going to have something that we can present to people and people can try, I think at that point, we could have a test net at that point.
Right. I see. Okay. So in the near future, is there anything that we can look forward to?
I think it will still take some time. I mean, in the near future, if we talk about like within 3 months and around that time, so probably not too much. But I think the first thing come out will probably, I mean, we'll have a lot of sort of content created to talk about the approach that we think about solving things, and then we'll probably have an early version of the core language without a lot of the libraries and like language specification will probably come out first. So I think for developers, it's definitely an opportunity sort of to see where we're going and understand the language in preparation for potentially building solvers with us. And but for users, I think it may be even a little bit further down the road in terms of having a testnet.
Right, I see. So I just want to throw out a quick reminder to everybody. If you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We probably will have time for at least one or two. But coming back to what you were just saying about the language coming out and having developers come in, some of this, I'm a developer myself. But hearing all of this is still, it's a little bit somewhat abstract in my mind still. I'm going to guess, and tell me if this is right. Once the language is out, it's going to be much more concrete from a developer standpoint on how you actually use the product, right? So that would actually give them a much better way of envisioning what they need to do in order to start integrating this for the date that it is actually released.
Yeah, I would say even before the language will generate a lot of content, and the content will walk people through some sort of the mental models and of intents, and then the problem being a solver, and then the centralizing force of most solvers face today, and then to build intent-centric sort of interactions or protocols, the hurdles that people will be facing. So there's a lot of like a prerequisite knowledge for people to really get. Again, we're on the bleeding edge here. I mean, like many things in Web3. So we definitely try to present and educate sort of in that fashion, and then the language, and then once you have the context of the problem space a lot more clear, then I think having the language specifications and hopefully we have some early version that people can play with, then it will become more concrete.
I see. Okay. So can you share with us a little bit more about the long-term vision of Khalani? And I think what's really being asked here is, how is this going to revolutionize the industry? What's it going to look like when there's actually lots of developers building on Khalani? How is it going to change the products? How are the average user going to actually interact with it?
Yeah. So again, I think to talk about the benefits and to talk about like what potentially could be a paradigm shift, right? I think it's best to go back to something people are familiar with today, which is in the Web2 space, and some sort of like an intent-centric but Web2 experience, right? I think that may help here a little bit. When we go to Web2, a lot of the interaction, the application interfaces are fundamental aggregators, right? So in other words, if you go to like on the US side, people use Kayak as the how do you book travel, search for flights, search for cars, hotels. It's like one place you can do a lot of your research and do your even booking directly on this one site, right? They give you many more ways to customize your travel experience that it's very useful for you. For example, what's the time, how long you want the flight duration to be, and then you want to hold, like, depending on that, and they will suggest hotels on which days are you going to be staying in that hotel, right? So it's a very good. So it's very aligned to the user type of UX, and I think in Asia they tend to be like super apps, like WeChat and whatnot, that will aggregate a lot of these underlying infrastructure for you. So you can just go to one place, you book, you search, and then you do the booking, and everything taken care of on the back end. You don't even know what kind of backend infrastructure that helps you do all these things, right? In Web3 today, we don't actually have this. In Web3 today, every app that we use are essentially protocol front ends. They only expose you to a single protocol, right? So if you go to Uniswap, they only show you Uniswap, right? So they don't show you other swaps, right? So similarly, if you go to Aave, they just show you, hey, here's the option to get a loan, right? They don't show you other things. But I think just like Web2, I think Web3 is also going to have this aggregator moment, and that will abstract away both in terms of information curation, right? So the owner of these interfaces will decide, curate what will be the underlying protocols and services will be safe and credible, and then useful for the user-specific demands, and will offer like more UX improvements over what's available on protocol-specific front ends. And then there's also execution, right? So the execution with the modular blockchains, all these services may live on different blockchains. And then they may charge different gas fees. They may interact with different assets on different chains. But the execution will also be totally abstracted away from you, right? So if you can just say, I want to get a loan, here is my Bitcoin, I want to get some USDC, that's it, right? And then the curator will find the right sources or distribute this loan to source it from multiple lending protocols and then secure the loan for you. And then you can even express high level sort of we call intents, right? Desire to say, I want to make sure the LTV it's always lower than 50%, right? So then it will just manage that margin for you. If there is, if collateral value decreases, it will automatically repay some of the loans, just like examples, right? So all this could be possible, right? But smart contracts today's expressiveness does not allow this type of interactions, right? So we see a lot of bespoke protocols are enabling this, but not in a platform-wide way. So what we're trying to do is provide a platform to make this type of interactions much, much easier, right? So we build the fundamental sort of bottom of the layer, bottom of the stack layer to enable interaction and collaboration and solution building for this paradigm. So that's, I think, it's probably the biggest unlock of the entire intents. And then, Khalani is going to be the bottom of the stack solution building layer for all the intent-centric interactions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like one of the big problems that we see during every bull market is congestion of specific chains. It seems like even though there are in many times, if you need to make a trade, people go straight to Uniswap because they have a large pool of liquidity. But that might not be the best deal, and especially when you take account the fees involved, it can actually be quite a bad deal. So a protocol like this would enable the best deal to come through, again, without the user even knowing what chain to go to. Is that right?
Yeah, so you're describing intent-centric interactions, right? So again, the entire intent is also a stack, right? So if from the top, you may have applications that allow user to express the intents, so intents, authorization, publication, and then you have sort of standard layer, maybe allow intents to be standardized so that on-chain they can be verified. And then you can have sort of the off-chain solution building layer or the solver layer, and this is where Khalani is, right? So we are like a layer of the intent stack. We're the bottom layer where solutions are discovered, and then solvers come together to collaborate to find the solutions. So yes, so we definitely will enable that user experience, right? But I guess we're not the entire stack, so to speak. Yeah. So we focus on building infrastructure. We don't focus on building the applications, but we will empower the applications to be able to be aligned with the users and then authorize any type of expressive intents.
Right. Well, it sounds kind of like a no-brainer from the developer standpoint because you're allowing them to build a much, much better product where currently nothing exists. So we have a couple questions. Let's go ahead and throw up the first one here. Do you plan to be associated with Nervos in any way in your future campaign, tweets, etc.? Because so far it doesn't seem like you want to. Nowhere in the blog post you mention either Axon or Nervos. So we kind of already addressed some of that. Of course, it's involved with that, but could you address that directly to the question asker?
Yeah. So I mean, again, I'm still co-founder of Nervos. I think that will never change. Right now, I'm 100% full-time on Khalani. But Khalani is, I consider like we use Axon, we use UTXO model. We work very closely with Cryptape in terms of, the UTXO side of things and, standards and so on and so forth. So on the technology side, it's actually very, very close collaboration. Now, Khalani is an independent project, we are building on top of Axon. I mean, in terms of not mentioning, it just we only wrote one single blog post. It's just introduction to Khalani. That's really it. We haven't really dived into any sort of technical architecture, which I think you see the cell models and a lot of the sort of Nervos will come out. But yeah, I think, and this is maybe a little bit beyond the question. I don't think something like Khalani can be built just by teams that because intent, I mean, is really like somewhat a buzzword today, right? And I guess since summer last year. But I think something like Khalani cannot easily really be built by someone sort of saw that buzzword and hype and jump on the hype train and start to say, okay, now how can we build infrastructure for that? It's very difficult, right? It had to come from, somebody that have not just me, but a team that has sort of have faced this problem straight up for multiple years and try to overcome and what can be a common solution with it, right? So it's definitely not coming from nowhere. And when I talk to folks, it's very clear that it's coming from Nervos.
Right. Okay, and let me put up this second part of this, which is the same person asking a little bit deeper question. So what do you think about the suspension of development of Axon and that it is left without developers? On that note, do you have plans on moving Khalani from Nervos Axon to another chain?
Yeah, so in a way, I mean, we're kind of taking over the development of Axon, if that makes sense. Ethan, who is the lead developer of Axon, joined Khalani. So, but obviously we have our own vision of, how, what will be the sort of what kind of applications we best enable by the infrastructure. So yeah, so we definitely will push forward. I mean, we'll continue building on top of Axon, and we're taking a pause a little bit, just do like a little bit of research, and then figure out the best way to have essentially like a dual VM, for example, chain and architecture. But yeah, I guess we're pushing it forward.
Yeah, it's still going forward. I mean, obviously, we're talking about a product that can only be built on Nervos and Axon. So, of course, nothing is stopping. Is I think really the answer to that question. Okay, I'm going to throw up one more here, which isn't really stated as a question, but it is kind of a question. It's please just focus on marketing. The CKB project deserve more efforts in this regard. Is there anything about marketing that you can tell us? I know it's still early for Khalani, but down the road, do you have any plans for marketing?
I know what people want to hear, right? But I don't know how to answer this question. So having been in this space for multiple cycles, and a lot of things people feel it's all marketing, and in a way, there's definitely some degree of element to it. But if you really build something fundamentally different, there also has to be substance. So I mean, you can talk about us publishing content on the Khalani side and let people know what it is and the way we think things, and engage in collaboration efforts. Those are probably the highest value marketing that you can have, like for early project to today.
Okay, and we just got one last question. Will Khalani have its own native token?
Yeah, don't ever ask a US-based founder with a T word.
Okay. All right. Well, that looks like that's all the questions. So we still have a moment here at least. Do you have any final closing thoughts you'd like to give us before we head out?
Yeah, I think I've said it in Telegram group before, right? So I feel 2024 really seeing a renaissance of the of a different paradigm that's coming. And whether you talk about immediate execution, whether it's option computing, whether it's Bitcoin rising as in terms of being a potential interesting developer platform, whether it's about intents, whether it's modular blockchain, all of them have the same thing in common, right? Which is off-chain generation or off-chain computing, and then on-chain verification. So in other words, a verification as the on-chain primitive, and then the paradigm of building applications around that, right? So this is true for just about all of them of the above. And I think, for Nervos, we've been working on this for several years. Nervos started almost 6 years ago as a verification first blockchain, right? Sort of off-chain computation or generation and on-chain verification style smart contract platform. And whether we are landing this opportunity to solve, generalizing the application semantics for Bitcoin and multiple assets, whether we're sort of capitalizing on this capacity to build intent-centric platform to interactions, whether we sort of tap into this platform to be part of the interoperability solutions, it's very obvious to me that this is the right place. And then we, again, like R&D wide, we've been spent the last several years on this exact same problem space. So the future is bright, really, for all the efforts that we spent. I'm very optimistic.
All right. Great. Yeah, well, we're definitely all looking forward to this. As a developer, I'm also very much looking forward to seeing more documents out there, more explainers about how exactly.
Yeah. So again, this is very early. Just to I think today is more like a secret reveal for for the Nervos community, because folks have been around for a long time. We'll definitely have more to reveal to come.
All right. Well, yeah, looking forward to it. I want to thank you again for coming here again today, Kevin. And for everybody who's not already following you, could you tell us what socials they should follow for the future?
So you can find me on X, KNWANG, Kevin Wang, and Khalani is at Khalani_network.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll put all of these in the YouTube description for anybody who wants to just click on the link later on. Okay, thanks again for coming, Kevin. And I want to say also thanks to everybody listening at home. We hope you enjoyed what we had to present today. I'm very much excited about this product. I hope you are too. And we'll catch you all next time. All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, everyone. Bye.